So let's draw a little food chain here, if you don't mind. And uh, so get your paper, and whatever I draw, you have to draw. So here we have a food chain we're going to draw here. And there's a lot of different possibilities of what we could draw. But let's just go ahead and draw. I always like to include the sun. It doesn't always include the sun, but I think that it's important enough that we should include the sun and the sunlight shining on it. Even though it's not really part of the food chain, it's where the energy starts, right? And that's what the food chain is about, is the energy. And so the energy then, you got a photosynthetic plant. So here's a leaf of a plant. Go ahead and draw that. And then the plant is doing photosynthesis, and that's called the producer. Okay, so go ahead and write that, producer. All right, and so that would be a plant doing photosynthesis. Now you can have something then eating the plant, and there's a lot of choices what we could do here. Let's just say it's I don't know, let's make it an aphid. Okay, I was thinking about making a caterpillar, might seem a little more obvious. I don't know if you know what an aphid is. They're little bugs. They kind of get on the stem of plants, and they have a little proboscis they stick in there, and they suck the sap out of it. And basically, they can live on the undersides of leaves or on the stem, and that would be an aphid. And the energy goes, and remember, the energy's got to go in the direction to the animal that consumes it, and so this would be a consumer. Consumer. Okay, now this is the first level of consuming, so it's called a primary consumer. All right, and now there's other vocabulary we could use here for producer here. This would also be called an herbivore, which I want you to know that, although I'm going to tend to use primary consumer. Again, I think it's getting out of focus here. Wish the camera would focus. There we go. Come on, come on, come on. Focus. 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 There we go. All right. So anyway, I got the primary consumer. Sorry about that. Now, what we have primary, then what's the next level? You know what this is. Secondary level. Okay, the secondary. Primary means first. Secondary consumer. So this would be carnivores, right? Or something that eats other animals here. So let's just go ahead and write carnivore. Sometimes you might say predator. It depends, but okay. So there's different terminology for it. And again, like this would be the autotroph, and these guys are heterotrophs, although I'm not going to worry about it too much. This is the real term I want you to have, primary consumer and secondary consumer. And so let's say that this, you may or may not know this, a ladybug is actually a secondary consumer. They eat aphids, which is why ladybugs are nice to have in your garden, because they eat garden pests, right? So a ladybug then is a secondary consumer. And then you have, these are trophic levels, by the way. Trophic levels. So each of these are different trophic levels. Okay, so secondary consumer. Now, what eats the ladybug? Let's say it's a bird. Let's just make him sitting there on the branch, I guess, rather than flying. I'm gonna eat you, Robin Redbreast. Okay. Now we could have had a lot of choices here. We could have made it be worms, the bird eating it, and then go, okay, what eats the bird? Anybody? We could have that be the top predator. Well, I don't know. Let's say a red-tailed hawk or something like that. Okay. Or, okay, I hate to do this, but a cat. Some people think, oh, you shouldn't let cats outside because they'll eat birds. And it's sad. It's true. Cats are predators. Okay, so then there's a cat. Whatever. You want to think of it as a mountain lion. I don't care. Okay, so secondary consumer. The third level here is tertiary. consumer. Now, you could say I'm at a quaternary consumer, and sometimes you may have a lot of steps in here. I'm just going to say nothing eats the cat, all right? What about a dog? No, dogs don't eat. That's gross. Okay, so let's just call this a top predator, all right? Predator. Or you could so it's called an apex predator top, okay? Now, it just turns out if there was no cats around, that could be considered a top predator, right? So the number of levels, really, there could be a lot of variety. We're going to get into the food web concept pretty soon. A lot of things eating a lot of different things. Generally speaking, you don't have too many levels, and there's a reason for that. We're going to get to 5 or 6 levels is usually the highest you're going to get. Now, something I'm going to not stress, but it's true. There's another thing here called a decomposer. Decomposers are really important. What they do is, what they take is the organic material and they convert it back into its basic nutrients that the plant can use again. Okay, so they can reuse the material stuff. Now, it's important to remember decomposers are bacteria, fungus, mushrooms are decomposers. Earthworms technically would be a primary consumer because they're actually eating plant material, but they help break it down, and their poop that they leave behind, the worm castings they're called, are really good, full of nutrients. And so these nutrients then can return to the soil. Instead of if you have a tree in the fall where it loses all its leaves, that would be a lot of lost, nutrient value, except for it decomposes and it returns to the soil. Now, one reason why I don't include it in here, what we're talking about here is the energy flow, the flow of the energy from the sun through to the top predator. Now, there's also material flows, the matter, the molecules, the atoms, and that's what gets recycled back. The energy doesn't get recycled back. The energy keeps coming from the sun. What gets recycled back is the physical material stuff. So there's energy and there's matter. And there's kind of the matter cycles, the energy flows. And so that's why I don't include decomposers so much, like make it a cycle, like sometimes you'll see it that way. Because if the energy doesn't cycle, the energy flows in one direction, ends up getting dissipated as heat is what ends up happening to it. Okay, so there's the trophic levels there from the food chain. And I'm going to come back with another video in just a minute.